Tokyo, Japan, March 9, 1945, 11:37 p.m. 334 American B-29 bombers are approaching the city. They are flying lower than any bombing mission in the history of World War II. Lower means more accurate. Lower also means the crews can see exactly what they are doing. What they are about to do to Tokyo in the next 3 hours will kill more people than the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 100,000 civilians. In a single night, the man who ordered this mission is sitting in a command center on the island of Guam. His name is General Curtis LeMay, and he has already thought through what happens if America loses this war. He said it out loud in public. To anyone who would listen, he said, "If we lose, I will be tried as a war criminal." He ordered the mission anyway. What happened over Tokyo that night? And the question of whether Curtis LeMay was a military genius or a war criminal is one of the most uncomfortable and important stories of the entire war. And almost nobody talks about it. To understand why Curtis LeMay ordered the most destructive conventional bombing raid in history, you first have to understand who he was and what the war had made him. Curtis Emerson LeMay was born on November 15, 1906 in Columbus, Ohio. He grew up in poverty. His family moved constantly. He put himself through Ohio State University and earned a commission in the Army Air Corps through sheer determination. From his earliest days as an officer, LeMay was known for two things: absolute precision and zero tolerance for anything less. He was not a warm man. He was not a man who made friends easily or inspired affection. His men called him Old Iron Pants, not as a term of endearment, but in the air he was extraordinary. He developed new bombing formations and navigation techniques that saved American aircrew lives. He led from the front, flying the most dangerous missions himself rather than sending others. By 1944, he had been given command of the B-29 bombing campaign against Japan. And what he found when he took command changed everything. The campaign was not working. The original American strategy for bombing Japan relied on high-altitude precision bombing, fly high, stay out of range of anti-aircraft guns, drop bombs accurately on specific industrial targets, destroy Japan's ability to make war without killing civilians. The theory was sound. The reality was devastating. Japan's weather was the problem. Clouds and jet stream winds at high altitude made accurate bombing almost impossible. Bombs were missing their targets by miles. Industrial facilities were barely being damaged. The campaign that was supposed to force Japan to surrender was barely inconveniencing Japanese war production. Meanwhile, American aircrew were dying. B-29 seconds were being shot down. Men were being lost for minimal strategic gain. LeMay looked at the results. He looked at the maps. He looked at the structure of Japanese cities, and he made a calculation that would haunt him and the history books forever. Japanese cities were not built like American or European cities. They were built primarily of wood and paper, densely packed, highly flammable. A different kind of bomb. A lower altitude and a different target, not factories. The cities themselves. Curtis LeMay's new strategy was so radical that he did not tell his superiors in Washington what he was planning until after the mission was already launched. He was afraid they would stop him. The plan was called Operation Meeting House. 334 B-29 bombers, flying low, between 5,000 and 9,000 feet instead of the usual 30,000, stripped of most of their defensive guns to carry more bombs. Not explosive bombs, incendiary bombs. Napalm. The plan was to create a firestorm over Tokyo, to use the densely packed wooden buildings of the city as fuel, to burn it. LeMay calculated the likely civilian casualties. He ordered the mission anyway. He later said something about this decision that has been quoted and debated ever since. He said, "I suppose if I had lost the war, would have been tried as a war criminal. Every soldier thinks something of the moral aspects of what he is doing. But all war is immoral, and if you let that bother you, you are not a good soldier." Those words tell you everything about Curtis LeMay, and nothing about whether he was right. The bombers reached Tokyo at 11:37 p.m. on March 9, 1945. They came in low, lower than any bombing mission before, low enough that the crews could see individual buildings below them. The lead Pathfinder aircraft marked the target area with X patterns of fire on the ground so the following bombers could find their targets in the darkness. Then the incendiary bombs began to fall. What happened next is almost impossible to describe in human terms. The wooden buildings of Tokyo caught immediately. The fires spread from structure to structure faster than anyone could run. A firestorm developed. A phenomenon where the fires create their own wind system, drawing oxygen toward the center and expanding the blaze exponentially. The firestorm created reach speeds of 40 miles per hour. It pushed the fire through neighborhoods faster than people could escape. People ran to rivers and canals to escape. The water around them boiled. People ran to open spaces, parks and fields. The firestorm followed. By dawn on March 10, 1945, 16 square miles of Tokyo had been destroyed. 100,000 people were dead. 1 million people were homeless. And the fires were still burning. Here's the fact that most people do not know. The firebombing of Tokyo on March 9 and 10, 1945 killed more people in a single night than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, more than Nagasaki, more than any single conventional bombing raid in the history of warfare. 100,000 dead in one night. And it was not the only raid. LeMay followed the Tokyo mission with raids on Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, Yokohama. City after city across Japan was subjected to the same strategy. In total, the firebombing campaign LeMay conducted between March and August 1945 killed somewhere between 200 and 500,000 Japanese civilians. Entire cities were reduced to ash. Japan's industrial capacity was devastated. Its ability to continue the war was being systematically destroyed. But the human cost was staggering, and LeMay knew it. He never once pretended otherwise. He said later, "I am not proud of the fact that I killed 100,000 people in one night, but I thought it was a matter of us or them in terms of who would survive the war." That sentence contains the entire moral complexity of Curtis LeMay. The question that has never been fully answered is whether what Curtis LeMay ordered was necessary. His argument was straightforward. Japan was not going to surrender through conventional bombing that missed its targets. An Allied invasion of the Japanese home islands was being planned for late 1945 and early 1946. American military planners estimated that such an invasion would cost between 250,000 and 1 million American lives. Japanese military and civilian casualties in an invasion were estimated in the millions. LeMay believed that destroying Japan's cities and its industrial capacity would force a surrender before that invasion became necessary. He was right. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. Before the invasion was launched. The firebombing campaign combined with the atomic bombs had destroyed Japan's ability and will to continue the war. The invasion never happened. Did LeMay's campaign save more lives than it cost? American military historians tend to say yes. Japanese historians tend to say no. The truth is that this question has no clean answer, and any person who tells you it does is not taking it seriously enough. Curtis LeMay came home from World War II as one of America's most celebrated military figures. He was given command of Strategic Air Command, America's nuclear bomber force. He built it into the most powerful military organization in the history of warfare. He became Air Force Chief of Staff. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal. He was one of the most decorated officers in American military history. The man who said he would be tried as a war criminal if America lost was instead celebrated as one of the key architects of Allied victory. But LeMay was never comfortable with celebration. He was not a man built for peacetime. He was blunt to the point of aggression. He advocated for military solutions to political problems in ways that made civilian leaders deeply uncomfortable. During the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, he urged President Kennedy to launch immediate airstrikes on Cuba. Kennedy refused. The crisis was resolved through diplomacy. LeMay considered Kennedy's decision a failure. In 1968, he ran as vice presidential candidate alongside George Wallace on a platform that included threatening to use nuclear weapons in Vietnam. He lost. He died on October 1, 1990. History has never quite decided what to do with Curtis LeMay. To tell the story of Curtis LeMay, honestly, you have to spend time with the Japanese perspective on what happened. In Japan, the firebombing of Tokyo on March 9 and 10, 1945 is remembered as the Great Tokyo Air Raid. It is one of the darkest nights in Japanese history. The survivors, called hibakusha in Japan, carried what they witnessed for the rest of their lives. Testimonies collected after the war describe scenes of horror that are almost impossible to read. People burned alive in the streets. Families separated in the chaos of the firestorm, never finding each other again. Entire neighborhoods erased as if they had never existed. And yet, here is the detail that makes this story even more complicated. In 1964, Japan awarded Curtis LeMay its highest honor for a non-Japanese citizen, the First-Class Order of the Rising Sunday. The country whose civilians he had incinerated gave him a medal. Why? Because Japanese military leaders credited the American bombing campaign, and LeMay specifically, with forcing the surrender that ended the war before the Allied invasion that would have cost millions of Japanese lives. The man who burned Tokyo received a Japanese medal for it. If that is not a power play and a twisted truth, I do not know what is. Here is the power play and twisted truth at the heart of Curtis LeMay's story. Every other story on this channel has a clear moral direction. Hiroshima Onoda, loyal to a fault but ultimately tragic. Desmond Doss, unarmed courage that saved lives. Oskar Schindler, a flawed man who found his conscience. Irina Sendler, pure moral heroism under impossible pressure. Curtis LeMay does not fit any of those categories. He was not a hero in the conventional sense. He was not a villain in the conventional sense. He was a man who looked at a war that was costing hundreds of thousands of lives and calculated that burning Japanese cities would end it faster than any alternative. He was probably right, and 100,000 people died in a single night because he was right. The power play is this: LeMay had the power to end the war, and he used it completely, without hesitation, without public doubt. The twisted truth is this: the country he helped destroy gave him a medal for it. And history still does not know whether to call him a genius or a monster. Maybe he was both. Curtis LeMay died on October 1, 1990. He was 83 years old. He never publicly expressed regret for the Tokyo raid. He never sought forgiveness. He never changed his position. He believed until the day he died that what he ordered on March 9, 1945 was the right military decision given the circumstances and the alternatives. History's Wildside is about power plays and twisted truths. And I want to leave you with something to think about after this episode. Every other story we have told on this channel has a clear emotional direction. You know how to feel at the end of it. Curtis LeMay is different, because the question his story raises is one that war always raises and never fully answers. At what point does ending a war become as monstrous as the war itself? LeMay believed he knew the answer. 100,000 people died because he believed that. And the war ended, and millions of people who would have died in an Allied invasion of Japan lived instead. I am not going to tell you what to think about Curtis LeMay. That is the point. History's most important stories are not the ones with clean answers. They are the ones that force you to sit with the question. Subscribe to History's Wildside for a new story every Sunday, power plays, twisted truths, and the moments that history almost forgot. This has been History's Wildside. I will see you next Sunday.